Previously on Nerd Punches Nerd.
Can we safely say that what it hit is, here's what it did. I think it hit the nerd core in everyone. But seriously, I think that,
That's a nice sentiment, Ben. Hello and welcome to Nerd Punches Nerd, the only podcast where a bunch of nerds pretend to physically fight for minor pop culture minutia. I'm Jeremy, here with Benji and Sam. Hey, how you doing, guys?
Hey, doing good.
So today, as it is Game of Thrones premiere day, we decided to have a little bit of chat, angrily rant, punch virtually and physically, about various topics, specifically one topic, which is Game of Thrones, the TV show. Or
Right. That pretty much sums it up, I think.
all right, so
Those reactions.
I think we all sort of have different perspectives. Of course, we've all heard Benj wax rhapsodic in his hipster way over how he, and only he, was the first one ever to read the Game of Thrones books way back in the year 90 something, and
97,
and before Game of Thrones was a twinkle in HBO's eyes, back when Oz was basically their only quality show, and soon, and they didn't even have the Sopranos yet.
Quality. If you look on it now, it's very dated.
It is, but I think there's a lot of good stuff to it. I will say I was only able to watch. I watched a bunch of it, and I enjoyed a bunch of it. But then other things came up, and my interest seriously waned because it was like there were so many other better things to spend my energy on. And it's not that it's bad; it's just that there's a lot of better stuff.
I've never seen Oz, but I definitely have heard that it doesn't hold up well.
Yeah.
to,
If you
like, a
look at it, it's
modern
like,
viewer.
in a certain way, this might be a good segue into talking about some of the general issues I have talked about with the Game of Thrones show, which is that Oz. If you look at Oz now, like a lot of things they do, it's kind of like, hey, we're HBO, we're this hot little network or whatever, or like we're this controversial network and we can do what we want. So we're gonna have all this crazy, drugs and sex and violent stuff there that you can't see on regular TV and all this weird taboo shit. And it's in a prison and it's really intense. And it's pretty clear they're like trying to they're just pushing more boundaries. Now back in the day it was more impressive and more cutting edge.
Right.
It kind of speaks to the issue with Game of Thrones, which that I generally just have with the show, which is what I talked about before, which is the overindulgence with like the gratuitous like sex and violence, which I think George R. R. Martin does very well, but I think the show sometimes does it a little too much. So, but that's not even really the issue at hand today. That's just sort of my general issue with the show. The thing I wanted to talk about today was, I guess, our different reactions to the fact that this season is going to be basically moving past or diverging way differently from where the books are going, and that it might be revealing stuff that happens in the books and storyline later on, because the showrunners, it seems like they know a little more about what's going to happen in the storyline. So I will say, for my stamp and viewpoint right now, I don't think I can handle watching this season before I read at least the next book, because I don't want it to be given away. It is a personal thing for me. I am personally connected with the books. It is definitely true, but I can't handle watching the series and have something be given away before I read it in the books. That's just I can't do it.
So Benji, would you say that like the way that you appreciate this story is that the books are like sort of the true medium, the original canon, and then the show, because the show is an adaptation, it's only like secondary to the books, right?
Yeah,
the books
it's
are
like,
primary. That's
Yeah,
sort of how you take in the story.
it's like one is the Torah and the other is just the Talmud. That's the way to look at it. Or one is Rashi or Tosfos or something like that.
One
But
one is the Old Testament and one is the New Testament.
ooh, making a controversy here. It's yes. Like yes. I have to admit, like I have to say, a big part of it has to do with my own personal connection to it and my own personal bias. Like I can't separate that or say that because of that doesn't play a big role. I do happen to think though. I mean, I think the original story is a lot better, and for the most part, adaptations aren't usually, I think, as good or comparable to the original. And just as a general rule. And I do think, and I don't know if it's just because of my bias. I think the first two seasons of Game of Thrones, I mean, even especially the first season, the ones that were most faithful to the books, I felt like they were a little more tightly managed and well done. I liked a lot of things about the last two seasons. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I think in terms of actually shows, like there are shows that I like a lot more. So yeah, to go back to what you're saying, Sam, definitely I see the original one is like you could say the canon, you know.
Yeah.
And the other one is kind of like a, you know what it's like? It's kind of like when you have like a maybe I don't know. It's like Watchmen has this like they'll have like not addendums. They'll have like it's like supplemental material.
Right.
You mean like? So specifically referring to like the Beyond Watchmen stuff.
Right. I wouldn't say before Watchmen because that's actually volume stuff. I just meant
No, that is what I mean. I'm sorry, I just misspoke. But before Watchmen is what I meant.
Well, I think Benji, you're talking about that extra stuff at the end of each chapter of Watchmen. Right?
Yeah. Well, no, not even at the end of each chapter of Watchmen. I'm trying to think of a good comparison that's like maybe it's kind of like this. You can think of, even though I love the Animatrix, you could think of the show as the Animatrix, the Matrix, in the sense of like, here's some extra stuff about the world. Even though the Game of Thrones show is supposed to be an adaptation, I feel like here's an extra little treat I have. But I'm not invested nearly the same way that I am in the books.
So that's interesting. That's kind of how I feel about, say, like Harry Potter, like Harry Potter books, Harry Potter movies, where like the books are really the true story, and the movies are not that great. They're kind of fun. They're like extra. You know, if you get any enjoyment out of them, it's a bonus. But like that's not the real story. There's nothing, or almost nothing in the movies which is in any way superior to the books. You know, and it's mostly just sort of like inferior. I don't feel that way about Game of Thrones. My feeling on Game of Thrones, while I did love the books when I read them the first time through, I feel like the books have been getting progressively worse over time since the third. The third book is awesome, and then like the fourth and especially the fifth book really are just like not nearly as good. Meanwhile, the show, I know Benji, you said something about how you think the first two seasons of the show were better than the second two. I disagree. While I think that the first season of the show is outstanding, I think the second best season is the fourth season. And I would probably rank the third season above the second as well. So basically, I think the show is on an upward trajectory, while the books are on a downward trajectory. And so for me, since the books aren't as good as they used to be, I've kind of let go of that whole concept of the books being, canon and the books being the true story and the show being like, an imitation of that. So just saying like, whatever, these are two versions of the same story. And, certainly the books are superior in a lot of ways, but not in every way. And, in some ways the show is actually superior. So, I appreciate them both equally. And so from that perspective, it doesn't bother me that the show is extending past the books and that like the show will reveal spoilers for the books, since the books haven't been published yet or whatever. I'm totally okay with that. I don't mind and whatever. I'm just at peace with it. Very zen right now about this issue. So that's my take. Jeremy,
look at you, Monk, just meditating in your fucking tower.
That's right. That's right.
I'm in the material realm.
It's made of ivory. Very nice. very tasteful. Anyway, yeah. And Jeremy, I actually have no idea what your opinion is on this, so please go ahead and tell us what the third perspective is.
Enlighten us. Same with
It's
me,
not really
but
the
like,
same, actually, as really either one of you, because, well, first of all, when I first read Game of Thrones, I was like, yeah, this is okay. But I wasn't, like, really that into it, and the funny thing is, like, I totally, like, read all the way past the second book with its red wedding, and was like, okay, next. And I was finally, like, getting through, and, I was like, man, this Theon guy, he's weird. And eventually I got to Storm of Swords, and I was just sort of like, I kind of gave up. So at that
Okay,
point,
Jeremy, I'm gonna have to jump in here because
yeah.
actually the Red Wedding is not in the second book; it's in the third book.
oh, so you, well,
What the?
I'm kind of confused about the sequence of events here.
oh yeah, you're right. So that's sort of what happened. Is that like a lot of people, as you know, when they got to the Red Wedding, was like, oh. But the problem is that it didn't really hit me like that because I kind of just sort of read it, and it didn't really like impact me in the same way. So it was weird because, I understand. I'm sorry, I just misspoke. Yes, well, yeah, I'm sorry.
Because you're like an unfeeling automaton that's just pretending to be human being. Is that what you're saying?
So basically, then it was like
I'm crazy and just have no feelings. The three nerds.
something along those lines. And then he's like, "Oh, you really should read them." I'm like, fine, I guess I'll try again. And the second time, I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, this stuff," and I got more into it, and I just read through all of them at that point, up to the last one at the time, which was A Feast for Crows. And then when the show came out, and I heard that there was going to be a new book, I read all of them again before the new book came out. At that point, so and also rereading them, I did enjoy a lot of that stuff in those other two books. Now, the funny thing is with Dance of Dragons, I still have some issues with a lot of that stuff. I don't think they're great in every way. I think there's some issues for sure.
You mean all the books? You don't think they're great in every way? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, specifically Dance with Dragons, I have some problems with some of the storylines. And even after I've read enormous amounts, I think I've read more about them than either of you have. I've watched more videos about them,
Yeah. I
conjecturing.
used to be really into that stuff, really into like reading all the like fan theories and like
Yeah,
analyses and stuff. But like I've sort of dropped out of that. I think you probably kept up with it a lot more than I have.
yeah,
I know you have.
right. And I know Benji's not into that kind of stuff, so I know a lot about it now, and I really do like the world. I mean, I bought that pretty cool volume, The World of Ice and Fire, which is very interesting. And the thing is, when the show first started, I was like, sort of hopeful because you don't really know about this kind of stuff, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. Not everything's exactly there, but it's really close. And it had because at that point I had only read it the twice, and so my memory of it wasn't exactly that perfect. It wasn't until I guess the second or third season, I forget which one, whatever one came after Dance with Dragons, that I had just reread them all, and I was like, now it's really closer in my mind. So my perspective was like, I really liked the first season a lot because it was like, wow, amazingly, they got it right type of thing. And the second season was like, okay, there's a lot I enjoy here, but like all the Daenerys stuff was kind of like weak during a
Well, that's
huge
kind of true. I
part.
think in the book too, the Daenerys stuff in the second book is kind of
Well, there's just
yeah.
not much there,
No,
and
but
they
it
drew it
looks
out.
better in the book.
I think it does because they didn't draw it out in the same way,
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, okay, so I feel like the same way about season four, which I do like, but my problem with it are a little are like certain storylines, like also, like the whole Theon thing. I don't really think they did a great job with it. We talked about before how I think
Yeah.
it should have been improved and that they could have expanded on it more, but they did more than they needed to. I think they could have kept him around, but just not shown as much as they did.
Yeah, we discussed this, and,
Yeah,
and we're pretty much all in agreement.
but I did like season 4. I think 3 is the best at this point. Um, and then 1, and then 4, and then 2. Uh, but part of that is the reason with 1 also is just because, you know, I had it was like the first of its kind in a lot of ways, and you could kind of look past a lot of issues with it in a lot of ways. And they're still sort of finding themselves, and it was so impressive how much they got right that you can kind of ignore what they got wrong. Whereas by season 4, sometimes you're like, oh well, I know that they got some things right, and then other times like for example, like in general, I love the casting that they do. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's such a strength, and just the way I read, I don't really visualize things in the same way other people do. So it's really cool to see these kinds of characterizations because I don't really, when I read, it just doesn't happen the same way. So it's cool to see that kind of thing, which is one of the main reasons why I was so disappointed by so much of the Harry Potter movies because it just didn't live up to how I feel about the characters in the books. Whereas with Game of Thrones, I feel like the acting is so good that it can get past deficiencies in writing
yeah.
because they're so good at it. Whereas like someone like Alan, who playing Snape, you
Or
know,
Rickman.
yeah, listen, he's a great actor, but he's 20 or 30 years older than Snape is supposed to be,
Right.
and he's way too handsome. Even for Hollywood ugly, he's not even that. He's not even Hollywood ugly, which I understand why they can't make an actually ugly character in these movies, but they could have at least, given him like a goatee or something, which the character has. I know we're getting off a little bit on that, but I'm just saying when you're thinking about adaptations, I was a lot more disappointed by the Harry Potter stuff, which I think are inferior by a really huge like margin.
Yeah.
Whereas
Especially that last movie.
Whereas, like the Game of Thrones show, I don't think that. Just because there's so many strong parts that, although I'm disappointed at times about certain aspects of it, I think there's also a lot of good stuff too. And sometimes I'm just like, oh wow, that was great. Maybe I thought they kind of whiffed the ending, like the fight a little bit, and that's really only because the guy who played the Mountain, I think, is too nice. He's not mean enough. Uh, I know which kind of interesting because he's like a giant, super strong guy. But I think he's like legitimately a nice guy in real life, and I think that actually came across a little too much.
He's kind of warm, you know.
Oh, whereas like we talked about how the guy who played him in the first season was like, "Holy crap, that's perfect!" Blood
Yeah, he was
chilling,
friggin' scary.
and it was like,
Because that
oh,
guy, because he was big and strong and intense,
yeah, it was
like
great.
really intense.
And this guy's like neophyte. He's not an actor. They hired him because he's a big guy and he's athletic.
Yeah.
It just,
And like I don't fault the show totally for what happened. I mean that's one of their biggest setbacks, the
yeah,
whole thing with the mountain they
right.
did, right? But that's not really their fault. I don't really.
Yeah, I mean, how do you find another giant guy that's also a great actor? I mean, come on. And this guy, he got a great opportunity to be in like some stupid movie or be in the Lord of the Rings or whatever it was. I forget. The Hobbit. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's the same kind of idea. I understand why he left, even though I don't think he should have, but I can't really fault them for that because they've gotten casting in general so well. And other times, like for example, as you remember, I just rewatched the last 2 episodes, so I thought a lot of the choreography at the wall still holds up really well in the second watch.
Yeah.
So I can't be like, oh well, they can't do choreography because they clearly did it like really well. Like just watching like the Jon Snow weird guy fight was great.
Yeah.
He really came. That guy, the actor Kit Harington, he really got good at that stuff. Which is good because I'd like to see him. Jon Snow I actually liked a lot from the book, and I felt like sometimes getting out of his head, which is of course a problem with any kind of adaptation, is tricky. Now I've heard some rumors about the new season, about some things that they might do that I might approve of, and other things I'm not sure, and how like they say there probably aren't any spoilers for the books. Probably is what the producer said, like because they probably don't quite remember because it's all done at this point.
Yeah.
But I mean, my feeling is I want to give it a shot because in one way, is it spoiling the books? Well, yes. On the other hand, it's not like it's being spoiled by like some idiot on the internet. Like when before the fifth Harry Potter book came out, some jerk on the internet spoiled that Sirius Black died before I had read it, and I was like, oh god damn it. So of course, when the sixth and seventh, I basically ensconced myself so no one could spoil it. I
Right.
didn't go on the internet until I finished those books. But that's not
Right.
the same thing.
That's a little different from like I don't
Yeah,
know the ending of Kick-Ass. Right. Kick-Ass the movie came out before the ending of the comic book had been published.
something like that. Yes.
I think so. It's not like it didn't like spoil the ending because it's like it's a complete story.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
better
just
than the
like you said.
comic
It's not
though.
just some asshole on the internet. That's like it's a movie.
Right.
Okay, but
And I think the ending wasn't even the same.
Yeah, so that's sort of like my feeling about the whole spoiling thing, where it's like it is, but on the other hand, I feel like I can still appreciate when the books will come out. Considering, like I said, with the first Game of Thrones stuff, is that I kind of like, I kind of whiffed it myself just reading it. Like I didn't like, I wasn't reading it close enough to really be impacted by Ned Stark getting killed or the Red Wedding. Because I don't know, I just wasn't. I don't know. Just the first time, I wasn't like just not that invested in the characters. It was just one of those things. I wasn't at the right point in my life or whatever reading it. It just wasn't drawing me in that time. I can't explain it other than that. Because since then there have been plenty of other things I've read which totally have worked. And later on,
But
reading
I
the
mean, like
series.
I kind of hear you. I was spoiled for Ned Stark's death
Mm-hmm.
in the book
Right.
because I read the second book before I read the first book, which I know is really weird, but
That's
but I
interesting.
did.
Yeah.
And so I knew he was gonna die, and so like it was still like I mean it was still intense to read the first book, but I kind of knew what was gonna happen. And then when I watched the TV show that first season, even though I knew exactly what was gonna happen, in a way it was still somehow like surprising when Ned Stark died. Because like even though you know he's gonna die, you kind of still think that it's not gonna happen, or at least
yeah, I
that
mean
was my
that's a mark of a really good, well done story.
because it was so good, because it was so well done. The way it was executed, haha. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that
Ba-da-da-da-da-da.
yeah, exactly. So no, but it was like so well done that even though I knew what was going to happen, I was still surprised by it. And that's the mark of like really good storytelling. And I think that's something that the show at its best can achieve,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
I think you have to give it credit for.
Let me also say this, because I guess a lot of it really does come down to I do have some issues with the show. The issues I have with the show are not enough for me to not watch it, because overall it's still one of the best shows out there. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
at least the top 10 that are out there or something like that. But here's the thing. Part of I mean, it really does have to do with me being invested in it as a fan of the books, because I've invested so many years of my life waiting for the next fucking book to come out. And
Yeah.
like it's not the showrunner's fault that for how long George R. R. Martin is taking with the books. Like that's not their fault at all. And it's you could even just blame it on George R. R. Martin for signing the contract. I don't blame him. Like I think it's cool that he did the show and all that stuff, and I think it's actually creating, like, opening up a lot of doors for TV and just film in general for what can be done. But the thing is, like I feel like I already spend so many years waiting for each installment, and then when I get the new one, I'd like devour it very quickly, or relatively quickly for me. And I've been doing that for for more than half of my life. So like,
I was
yeah,
gonna say it's been like 20 years practically,
no, it's crazy, yeah, because
almost 20 years.
yeah, because I think it came out in '96 or '97. I had the book in '97 or '98, something like that. I'm 28 now, so I was like 12 or 13 when I started reading them. So I mean, this is something Joel pointed out to me, is that we spent more than half of our lives like waiting for the books to come out.
Mm.
So like, but it's true. So I'm just like, for me to have the
Listen, it could be
storyline.
worse. You could have started reading Stephen King's The Dark Tower, back in 19.
Bite your tongue, Sam. Bite your tongue.
Wait, how long did it take him?
I think it took him 30 years to finish those books.
I mean, that happens, but it's like, if it's going to be spoiled by something else other than I want to find out things that happen through this, through the way that I originally planned it. I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't know if I'll give in. I'm going to try not to. But I don't think my perspective is totally an invalid one. It is an emotional one. It is a personal bias one. I'll totally own up to that. But I think that is a perspective it's because of it taking so long, and because of the length of time I've been into it, it's like maintaining a ritual. It's like maintaining a tradition that's meaningful to yourself. That's really what I'm doing. So, and I don't feel like, in addition, like I don't feel like the shows still uh, create the same connection to the story or characters I feel like the book does. And it may once again be my own bias because of how invested I've been in it. But still, but do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Although, we all have our different perspectives on this kind of thing, and I don't begrudge you for feeling this way about it, just
Thanks,
because,
Jared.
it's funny, like, I mean, let me think about it this way. All right, so when did I start reading Harry Potter? I started reading Harry Potter in the 90s, when after I believe the third book came out. I think I started reading from the first one, and it took me a while to find the third, or maybe it was the second. I forget exactly. The second one definitely had come out because you had both of them that you had borrowed, and so I have a lot of time invested in that, you know. And for me, part of it was like it was fun to see it on the screen, but it was also like it just was so disconnected for me that it was hard for me to see it as much of a betrayal in a sense. Like if all right, so I'm trying to think. Let's say that that same thing had happened where the movie screenwriters had found out from J.K. Rowling what the ending was going to be and had done it first. Well, I think that if they had done it with the same level of quality that the movies, I would have been pissed off. But because I don't really think of that as the Game of Thrones, I don't think that their quality isn't that poor. So my feeling is, unless it really gets bad, like I'm like, what the hell are they doing? I'm not really feeling like I'm gonna stop at this point. I mean, I don't want to minimize your objections on this because you're hardly the only one. I mean, do you remember those guys, Linda and Elio, who are
No.
basically like the guys who do own Westeros.org, and
Oh yeah.
they are George's friends, and they co-edited that World of Ice and Fire with him, you know, and they put out a video where they were talking about the upcoming season. Is like, do we really want to watch it? How much is it going to spoil? You know, there's a lot of people who want us to watch it and compare it to the books and do analysis of it, but we don't we don't really want to be spoiled for the books themselves. And they're more negative than we are, even, for sure. So, because they know the material, let's just say, more than probably anybody else. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I heard George R. R. Martin talk about them, knowing some things he didn't know.
yeah, it's very impressive to hear their analysis. It's like, oh, geez, I didn't think of that. Oh, that's right. Like this talking about layers of things that George had put in there. You're like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. It gives me more of an appreciation for the book, even if I didn't pick up on a lot of stuff, because there's so much detail. There's so much detail that these crazy conspiracy videos that I like watching are like, oh my, they're basically he's like these people that they take like lines about various families and like construct giant narratives from like 20 lines over the course of all the books. Like what? And I was like, well, technically, all you're saying is sort of true, but you're kind of extrapolating to a very, I don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
doesn't
Like
doesn't
the
sound like doesn't sound like conspiracy theorists at all. Or how
like
they
the
at
like
all.
the Marlin conspiracy.
Oh,
Like
that one's a crazy one, but some of these are more
um,
reasonable than others.
yeah. By
Um,
the way, for the record, The Gunslinger was first published as a book. The first book was published in 1982,
mhm.
although the first chapter of The Gunslinger was published in a magazine all the way back in 1978.
Okay, that's a
and
long
the final
time.
7th volume of The Gunslinger was published in 2004. So if you're counting from 1978 to 2004, that's actually 26 years.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Which
yeah.
which Song of Ice and Fire might surpass.
I mean, there.
First book to last book, it might surpass.
I'm trying to
26
think.
years.
There are some series that I like that have never been put into any kind of adaptation, and some that definitely never will. One of my favorites was a series called the Dragon Knight series by Gordon Dixon, and then he passed away before he could finish. But on the other hand, it didn't seem like he was going necessarily to a point where he was going to finish. It was just like more adventures. So it was sort of like sad, but I didn't feel like it was exactly the same thing. Now, of course, there's a lot of assholes, on the internet talking about like, well, geez, what if George dies? Then at least we'll have Game of Thrones. And it's like it's kind of a horribly insulting thing to say. Just
It's really interesting because we probably should note that like George R. R. Martin's point of view is diametrically opposed to my point of view or how I'm going to do it. I mean, he said like, who cares? Like that was his whole thing, right? He's saying like, who cares this world? Like once you can enjoy it anyway and all that. And I understand what he's saying, but like, it comes down to also a lot of just like personal preference for how you enjoy things or not. It's not like I don't enjoy things when I know it's going to happen. And Sam, what you were saying about the way they did Ned Stark killing or even the Red Wedding, I think they built that up pretty well and did that well.
Yeah,
You didn't want it to happen. With Oberyn Martell's death and all that, I think I think that was very effective too.
Mm-hmm.
But like I often like to be as surprised as I can. Like when there's a new book that I want to read, I don't read what's on the back. Like I like being blind in it. But that's part of the enjoyment for me, is just not knowing. And I still feel like even if you were going to say that the the last two books are inferior, I really love Feast for Crows. There are things I like about Dance of Dragons. I do think it has more issues than the other books. I do really like Feast for Crows, but still, I still feel like he still probably got a better sense of the characters and story because it's his thing than the show does. And I want to try to honor that. However,
I also want to say something. I know I said before that I thought the books were in a downward trajectory and the last two weren't as good. I anticipate that the last couple of books will get better as he sort of like brings everything in and starts to wrap things up. Instead of having the story like extend and sprawl, now he's trying to like, wrap it up and bring everything into, back in. It's more I'm not really
contract.
saying anything coherently.
You mean it's contracting as opposed to expanding?
Instead of expanding, the story is contracting, and instead of like sprawling, and it's actually like moving towards a denouement, and that I think that
there isn't a climax yet.
Right, exactly. Like these last couple of books have been a little bit of like there's been sort of filler, you could say, or maybe filler is not the right word.
Luckily, he tied up some of it in like luckily
Right.
he killed like the worst point of view character, which is that Martell kid.
Yeah.
He incinerated him. so we could just take care of that.
But the point is like things are becoming more focused now. Things are driving, things are moving. So I anticipate these, the sixth and seventh books will be a lot better than the fourth and fifth.
But here's the thing, like I don't want the stuff that's happening with Aegon, I don't want to find out about that from the fucking show. Like I want to find out about it from the books because like I was so excited.
And that's fine. That's your prerogative.
Yeah, I know. I'm repeating stuff, but yeah, I mean, I think it's going in an exciting direction. So it's, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to whether you care about things being spoiled or not, and whatever that may mean. Also, we're getting more and more into an age of like, our spoilers are spoilers really going to be able to be protected, so to speak? I mean, actually, it's interesting because it's like, Sam, you had mentioned in a previous podcast how like there didn't really used to be a thing about spoiling. Like people, it was a big shock when people found out about Darth Vader. You know, uh,
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
but at the same time, like then after that, it became a thing of like don't spoil this or that, and in the internet is all about saying like spoiler alert. But now, since the internet is so pervasive and people just talk all the time, are we really going to be able to keep these things in? And that's also kind of what I'm concerned about.
Well,
That
you've heard of
It's
the
funny. I actually think people are more respectful about spoiling now than they were a
guys.
few years ago.
Did you hear about this thing that Google is doing about they're trying to patent a spoiler technology thing that will basically there were I don't know, I mean that's nothing that's been implemented yet, but the idea is it's an anti spoiler patent. Basically, it tracks your TV or movie viewing progress and filters out information on the internet that you haven't seen yet.
So does it for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the way it's going. It's like one of those things that could be convenient. That's also kind of scary.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
let me
exactly.
before we wrap things up here, I just want to like Sam, you did see the end of Breaking Bad, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Sam, you got to do that so we can have a break.
Listen. I'm sorry. I know. I need to watch the end of Breaking Bad. I haven't gotten
All right.
to it.
Fine. But you guys have obviously right. You both have seen The Wire. I know that
Yeah.
much. I found out about a certain character dying. But the truth is that didn't ruin the show because seeing how things happened was still really great. I still think of it as one of the best shows I've seen. So it's hard. It's hard to really know about this type. I mean, because Game of Thrones to me, it's not over yet. It's I don't think it's good. It would have to be really good, like really good, like more consistently, to overtake The Wire for me right now. And I just don't think it's done that. Like there are other shows that I really like a lot. Like I think The Sopranos had a lot of weak stuff too, so I don't really think of that as better. But I really like The Americans, which I think is really great.
Mm.
And there's it's hard to sort of say like but when something isn't
So
ended,
would you place Game of Thrones in that group of like the best shows you've ever seen?
Yes, but because it's not over yet, it's hard to be sure. I actually don't put Breaking Bad there.
You know?
No, I like.
Kind of agree with you. We kind of.
Well,
Sam, this is why you need to
yeah.
finish it. So
I don't.
You need to finish it.
I don't want to,
Because
because I don't want to bias you too much. I'll just say, in my opinion, I enjoyed it. I thought the acting was great. I just don't happen to think that it's one of the best shows ever. If just when you compare it to other things, that's just how I feel. And I've seen the whole thing.
I don't know really what else really comes close to The Wire except for things in other genres. Like Firefly does, but it's a totally different thing.
True.
And South Park does, which is also totally different.
You really can't compare those kind of shows.
Right.
Well,
right.
South Park
I mean,
has been on for so long.
You might as well just like throw in Sesame Street in there if you're going to
No,
talk about
well,
the
no.
greatest shows of all time.
No, that's different.
It's like so different.
No, I know what you're saying. Plot-driven shows, not shows you figure out a fucking like puzzle and.
Yeah, also you can't always just like pick and choose with this stuff. Like for example, I could say, well, the first sort of 8 1/4-ish seasons of The Simpsons are one of the best shows ever. Then there's like it's like, well, yeah, it's not that's not what we have.
Game of Thrones, certain episodes are some of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen. I will say that.
Yeah.
They have specific episodes. I mean, like the courtroom scene with Tyrion this past season was incredible. They like knocked that out of the park, and like Peter Dinklage was outstanding.
He was outstanding.
That episode and that scene, but like now it's good. But just I mean, like I had such a hard time seeing things go close to The Wire. But the thing about The Wire, you compare to Breaking Bad, is they're both crime shows. So they can be compared.
Right.
You can compare, let's say, Simpsons and South Park, or Saturday Night Live and stuff like that.
No, Simpsons and South Park are good examples because they're both ones that are still going, and I think that South Park has had a better track record going forward than The Simpsons has. Because The Simpsons has had like bits and pieces of stuff, but I can't even remember a great episode since that Neil Gaiman one, and that was a couple years ago. So I'll sometimes like kind of that was kind of fun, but it doesn't really stick with me. The Simpsons ones, which is saying something, especially because the South Park ones are. All right, so I think all we've decided is, you know,
Those are our 3 questions.
That's right.
all right. Well, in any event, it's gonna be premiering soon, unless you download a leaked copy off the internet, which you shouldn't. Oi. In which case, maybe you've already seen it. All right. Well, this will conclude our to spoil or not to spoil. That is the question in podcast about Game of Thrones. All right, guys. Nerd you later.
Nerd you later.